Hi, I'm Stein. I'm a clinical psychologist and founder of MHS, an international psychological test publishing company and development. Great to be here with you on Phil's show. For me, happiness is really the ability to have purpose in life, set goals, and achieve those goals.
Oh, no, go ahead, Steve. Keep
I was
going.
just going to show you a copy of the book.
Oh, yeah, let's show the book. So the new book is Hardiness, Making Stress Work for You to Achieve Life Goals. So I love
And
that. And Emotional Intelligence for Dummies. Both fantastic books, friends. So we'll talk more about both of those, especially the Hardiness one today. So, Steve, thanks for joining me today. I appreciate it.
great to be with you, Phil.
Yeah, so let's get started and let's define what hardiness is for those who might not be familiar with that word.
So hardiness is actually a concept that has been under research for the last 20 or so years. And my co-author, Dr. Phil Bartone, has done a lot of that research in the U.S. military. He's a retired colonel, taught at West Point, and did a lot of the research there, looking at what makes successful leadership and what makes people work well or operate well under stress. So hardiness consists of what we call the 3 C's. The first one is commitment. And what that means is really having a purpose or goal in life, something that you strive to, something bigger than yourself. For some people, it's their religion and God. For other people, it's their country. For others, it's a spiritual thing. But it's something that you sort of strive for in terms of your life goals. The second C refers to challenge. And that involves a process or a way in which we deal with change or stressful situations where we can sort of step back a bit and look at the situation as sort of like a puzzle and something to be solved. So we don't get immersed in the emotion and all the difficult aspects of trying to get through those difficult situations. It's also something like, having a problem and asking a friend how they would solve it, being a bit more objective about how you approach the situation. And the third C is control. And that's all about knowing what things in your life you can control versus those that you can't. For example, when we play with high-performing tennis players in the sports world, they can't control the weather, they can't control who their opponent is, but they can control where they stand, how they hit the ball, and their mental state in the competition. So there's all kinds of things that you can control, and the ability to focus on those things you have more control over and not waste your time worrying about things that you have no control over is a big aspect of getting through stressful situations.
Wow, that's fantastic. Well, let's put this in the sales realm and talk about that. Let's talk about that commitment. How do we make sure that our salespeople have a commitment? Do we have to connect up the goal to the greater goal of the organization, or do we keep it small and just talk about the department goal? How do we do that, Steve?
Well, I think we do both. We look at the greater goal of the organization, and some of the research that's looked at this found that if you really think of what you're doing in terms of that greater goal, for example, what your organization is contributing to society. I mean, you're selling houses. Well, you're providing a home, a place for people to live, to enjoy their lives. You're selling shoes. Well, you're making people comfortable. You're making their lives better by giving them better support in terms of getting from place A to B. So it really starts with what is it that you're trying to achieve? What's the ultimate goal of your organization in terms of helping people? I think once you come to grips with that, then it becomes easier to scale down the line and find smaller goals. My goal for my organization, my goal for myself. And, it's always great to have daily goals for yourself. I want to make 10 calls today. I want to talk to 3 new customers today. And then you can look at the end of the day and say, wow, I've come close to meeting my goal, or if I didn't quite meet it, this is what I'm going to do tomorrow to ensure that I do. But we want to be satisfied every day with what we do.
So does some of that, do we have to be emotionally intelligent to do that, Steve? I mean, that seems like that kind of dovetails right into your other book.
It does in a way. So emotional intelligence certainly does help because that gives you the skills to get these things done. I think of hardiness as kind of the strategy, the sort of, the belief system, the attitudes within you, the things that really drive you. Emotional intelligence are more the skills that enable you to carry it out, the tactics. So in order to be a better salesperson, for example, one of the elements of emotional intelligence is empathy. in our research with salespeople, we found that those who are empathic, who really listen to what the customer needs, are much better able to make the sale.
Oh, well, of course, right? That seems to be so obvious, and yet research bears that out, which makes me pretty happy. So why do we think that then? Is it low EI? You think that people don't do this, or is it just awareness, or is it something that people can't learn?
It's a combination. I mean, we might call it low emotional intelligence. They're so worried about making the sale. All they want to do is talk to the customer and tell them all the benefits of the product when the customer may not even be interested. So that's a sort of a lower level of emotional intelligence where you're not paying attention to what the customer really wants.
Okay. So we must pay attention. Okay. And we have the commitment there that we get that higher purpose. Okay. So let's talk about the challenge, taking back and looking at that as a puzzle. I think salespeople do this pretty well. That's at least the best ones that I've seen. What does the research bear out on this?
Well, challenge really helps you get through those difficult situations, and the research definitely supports that. So you're doing your sales presentation and somebody raises a red flag, right? Well, that's not going to work for our company. We don't have X, Y, or Z. Well, then that's your challenge. That's your ability to say, you may be correct. This particular part of what I'm trying to provide may not be right for you. However, there's other elements of what I have that you might want to take a look at, right? So challenge is the ability to sort of step back, not get overwhelmed by the fact that you're getting a rejection, but to look at the situation differently and maybe present an alternative that's more acceptable to the client.
Well, and finding a solution doesn't always mean that it's a straight line. Sometimes we have to go around it. Sometimes we got to go over it. I mean, that old saying, right? However we can get past it, we have to get past it. So how do we stay hardy in that when we're getting red flag after red flag after red flag? What's a strategy or a tactic we can use for that, Steve?
Well, what we do with people is practice. This has to happen before you walk into the sales situation. You've got to step back before you even go in there and kind of imagine it. We use visualizing a lot. So you imagine yourself going into that sales situation. You imagine all of the objections that the person can come up with, and you start to plan in advance what your solution might be. So it's really about practice, preparation before you go in there, and to visualize it, to actually see yourself succeeding in those situations. We do this with professional athletes, and it works really well because you can never predict what's going to happen in a competitive situation, and you have to be prepared, and you're not going to do it under stress in the moment, or very few people are able to do that. So it's best to really prepare yourself as much as you can for those off-putting moments.
So you said two words there that I think are interesting. You said practice and visualization. Are they like, do they touch, or are they separate skills, or are they the same thing?
They work together. So you practice the visualization. You start with the vision of making a successful sale. You start with, I'm going to go in there and this is going to be a piece of cake. And you do your sales presentation and you go through it. And then you step back and say, okay, what are some objections that might occur? So you start with one. Then you go and revisualize it again and have someone sort of interrupt you in your presentation and give the objection. Then you think about some alternatives that you can use to deal with it. And the easiest might even be something like, that's a really good question. Do you mind if I get back to you with that? So you may not have to answer it right away. You may have a generic fallback position, but you got to imagine yourself doing it. So when the time actually comes, you're cool as a cucumber and you're professional, and it's not like they threw you off balance, right? Because if you look like you're off balance, that's not going to help you make the sale. You want to be smooth and professional, your stuff, and you can say, yeah, that's a really good question, and I'm going to get back to you with a much better answer on that.
So practice also, that helps us with the confidence as well, and that visualization helps with confidence, which is a key component of a successful sale.
Absolutely. They can smell the confidence, right? When you walk in that room, if you're nervous and don't really know your stuff, they're not going to feel, am I going to trust this person, whether it's a $500 sale or a $50,000 sale? They want to know that they're dealing with someone that they can trust. And, trust and authenticity are really critical in today's world. And it's going to be hard to trust someone who's kind of sweaty and not sure about what they're saying. You know, you're going to have a tough time closing that deal.
Yeah. Don't get sweaty for the sale, huh, Steve?
Right.
That's funny. That's funny. Well, that's so interesting that you mentioned that authenticity piece. I think that is something that also comes out of the challenge, but I think it's also a commitment to actually having that. How does authenticity play this big role in the hardiness?
Well, if you're going to invest in someone or in someone's solution, you want to make sure they're honest. They're telling you the truth, that they walk the walk. And it's pretty hard to do that if there's a lack of authenticity. If I sell you something and never deliver it, or if I promise you, a follow-up to the report by Tuesday, and it's already Wednesday and you don't have it, who's going to trust you? I mean, you've got to really walk the walk. You have to be authentic if you want to be successful in areas such as sales.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, let's talk about control then. Let's talk about the next C, and then we're going to talk some about EI this morning. So control, right? What you can control and what you can't control. I think that's often up in the air when it comes to salespeople. So what are some of the things that they can't control, and how do they get a better grip on that without squeezing it too hard?
Well, I can usually control the price to a certain degree, whatever, the organization allows me to, whatever leeway I have on that. I control maybe delivery. I might be able to control the way I describe the product. I can describe it in, authentic but meaningful terms that make, that they're looking for. So there's a lot of areas that I have control. I can control my delivery, my presentation. I can control the offer, whether or not I can throw something in extra or not. So there's a whole series of things that I'm able to control. What I can't control is the customer's reaction, right? They may not like this part of my offer, or they may want a cheaper price, or they may want some other alternative. I may not be able to control that, but I control my reaction to what they're asking for. So it's really good to sort of know going in there that these are my boundaries. This is the package that I have, and I can't maybe go beyond that. And if they're asking for something that really is outside of my control, then maybe this isn't the right sale for me if I can't manage it. And don't try and fudge it and look like I can deliver when I really can't, because that's worse. Then you lose your credibility.
Yeah, well, that's inauthentic as well. That gets back to your word about authenticity. If I'm like, I think I can do that. Well, that's not confidence. That's not authentic, and that's not going to help you close.
Exactly.
Okay. So with that, let's talk a little bit about EI this morning. The book is fantastic, Emotional Intelligence for Dummies. It's not for dummies. It's for people who are wanting to understand more about emotional intelligence and get started. I would argue it should be called the EI Bible. There's so much in there, Steve, that's so helpful. So tell people, first of all, let's do a good job of defining that, because we did a great job of defining hardiness. Now let's define the emotional intelligence, please.
Okay, so there's 5 key areas that I talk about in the book about emotional intelligence. There's a number of definitions. We started working in this space about 25 years ago. Nobody even heard of emotional intelligence when we began. So our definition has been relatively constant, but it changes slightly as we've done the research to support the model. And the first aspect of emotional intelligence is really what we call self-perception, which is the ability to understand your own emotions, to know how you're feeling. And this is both from a micro level, like if I'm feeling a little anxious in my stomach right now talking to you, to really understand that it's anxiety about talking to you and not related to the seafood I ate last night, right? So the ability to really understand what's going on. The second big area is self-expression. And this is really important in sales, how well you express yourself. It's also what we found that helps distinguish really effective leaders. If I can really be clear and express myself well to you, that's going to lead to a lot of dividends for me down the road. If I'm going to sell something, I got to be able to express myself. I got to be assertive. I got to ask for the close. I got to have those skills. The third area we call interpersonal skills. And that's the ability to initiate and cultivate relationships with other people. And I'm sure you've seen those salespeople with those huge Rolodexes. And the same goes with leaders who have a wide variety of people they can count on when they need help with something. That requires interpersonal skills. And one of the problems you sometimes see, in the technology area, somebody gets promoted to a management position or even a sales position who's really great at tech, but they really don't know how to interact with people too well.
Yeah.
That's not a sign for success. So interpersonal skills are the third one. The fourth one is the ability to use emotions in decision making. We all make decisions every day, all through the week. And believe it or not, emotions are a significant part of those decisions. Even if you think you're being purely rational and logical, there's always an emotional component. The research has shown when we make decisions. So the ability to use emotions properly, not get over emotional, where you get overexcited about things, and not to be under emotional, where you don't experience emotion, to have the right amount of emotion. And, some of the research has looked at things like stockbrokers and the ability to buy and sell stocks. If you're too emotional, you make mistakes. If you're under emotional, you make other mistakes. So decision-making and emotion is important. And the final area is stress management, the ability to manage stress. And that ties into the hardiness area. People who are high in emotional intelligence are much better at getting through and managing stressful situations around them.
Okay. So self-perception, self-expression, interpersonal, the emotions and decision-making, and then the stress management. Those seem like things that we all can learn. Now, are those skills, Steve,
Yeah.
or are those things that we're born with?
They're all skills. I mean, some people are born with more of it than others. Some people are naturals, especially when we look at things like under interpersonal empathy, right? Some people are really natural at listening to others and paying attention. You think of Oprah Winfrey or people like that. They just have that skill and are really good at it and continue to develop it. Some others of us really have to develop it. We have to work at it. And the good news is in the books, and maybe even through coaching, you can learn to be much better at these skills.
Does it start with awareness that we don't have the skill, or can we just start from anywhere and just start diving in?
It's better to start from awareness because you want to know where your strengths are and where your challenges are. Usually in coaching situations, we use a tool called the EQI 2.0, the Emotional Quotient Inventory 2.0, and that assesses on the 15 different scales of emotional intelligence within these 5 areas and tells you where your strengths are and where your challenges are. And that way we can celebrate our strengths. Maybe I'm really good at interpersonal relationships, but I'm not so good at assertiveness. I don't really tell people what I think and feel. So we can develop those skills. We can practice them. We can work at them and see amazing improvements.
Excellent. That's encouraging, because anytime there's a skill, it's not something that's just innate. That really is helpful. So if we look at those, let's talk more about self-expression, because I think that's one that sometimes folks struggle with. Tell me, how do we get better at self-expression?
Well, again, we're getting back to the area of practice. A lot of it is looking at how we are in terms of assertiveness and understanding assertiveness and the difference between being assertive and aggressive. Assertive is really the ability to express your thoughts, feelings, and beliefs, but in a way that's not harmful, in a way that's not stepping on someone else's toes. You and I can disagree politically. We could be at opposite end of the polls, as we see all over the country today, but we can still agree on, I don't know, baseball, or we can agree on other things. And we learn how to express ourselves and say, Phil, you like candidate X, I hate his guts, but you're a nice guy and we can still get along and we can play tennis together or whatever. So being assertive is being able to express your thoughts, feelings, and beliefs, but with not really hurting or insulting the other person. So that's one big part of self-expression.
Okay, what's the other big part?
Well, the other involves the ability to develop those interpersonal skills and how to approach people and how to speak to them in ways that are going to be more attractive than unattractive, right? So it's really a matter of attraction in presentation, so that when we express ourselves, it's in a way that people really want to listen to what we have to say, right? They're not running away from us because we're yelling at them or saying something stupid.
Yeah, let's not yell at people. That's probably not going to help. I need to work on that with my 8-year-old. So I understand that a whole bunch. So cool. So let's go into one more of these, Steve, before we wrap up. And for folks that want to get a copy of the book, go to StevenStein.com. That's StevenStein.com. Stein.com. Stephen's got quite a few books up there. The most recent, Hardiness, as well as Emotional Intelligence for Dummies. Great books. So let's talk about emotions, because emotions run hot. You talked a little bit about politics. Politics somehow brings out the worst in our emotions. But how do we do a better job in the decision-making process of being the right emotion?
Okay, so a lot of decisions are emotional. When we buy a car, we do all kinds of things, and sometimes our emotions will override the logic. I'll buy that flashy red convertible, that costs $150,000 before I realize, man, I don't have the money in the bank to pay for that. So it's really a matter of being able to step back and look at the logic of the situation and how we feel about it. Intuition is important, and we've got to pay attention to those little nudges from within our stomach saying to us, you know what, this may be a good decision or this may not be a good decision. And kind of look at it. What is it telling us? What are our emotions telling us about that particular decision, that particular job we're about to go into, that particular customer we're about to sell? Do I feel good about this customer, or do I feel this may not be such a good thing? So it really has to do with paying more attention to what your emotions are telling you, because emotions are based on past experience, and our experiences kind of load up into that emotional part of our brain, and they give us warning signs. Emotions are there to warn us about danger or tell us a situation is safe. So pay attention to your gut instincts about a customer. It doesn't mean you have to do everything your gut says. You may say, hey, this customer doesn't smell really good to me. But you may say, but I may have the skills to overcome that, and I'm going to dig a bit deeper and use curiosity to see if this is the right customer for me. So there's a lot you can learn about balancing your emotions and your decision making, and emotional intelligence is one of the keys to getting there.
Absolutely. EI is so important, and yet so often not even thought about as something there. I would argue it is one of the hardest skills to have, and yet we call it a soft skill, which is so interesting to me.
Absolutely. Yeah, it may sound soft, but it's really hard, and it's really important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, Steve, as we're wrapping up here, how do people get started on this journey to being more hardy and more emotionally intelligent? What's like the first or second or a couple steps?
Well, one of the things I think that's an easy way to start is by using your ears, by listening more. So when you're talking with someone or interacting with someone, pay attention to what they're saying, but also pay attention to what they're not saying. Phil, when you greeted me this today, you said, hey, how are you doing? How are things? And I can say, oh, they're just great. Then you may look at me and say, you know what? You're saying they're great, but they may not really be great. There may be something going on in there. So if you pay attention carefully to people and listen with that third ear, I think that's going to be important for you to sort of pick up on the cues. And that's going to give you a lot of mileage if you learn to be more empathic.
Yeah. Listen, pay attention, be present with people, and be more empathic. Those are great, great suggestions, Steve. Lots of great stuff today talking about hardiness and emotional intelligence. Again, if you want to pick up a copy of the books, go to stevenstein.com. That's StevenStein.com. The books are Hardiness and Emotional Intelligence for Dummies. They're fantastic. I've read and enjoyed them. The tips that you gave today about hardiness, commitment, challenge, and control, right on the money. Great stuff, Steve. I really appreciate you taking time with me today.
Thanks for having me, Phil.